I'm Emil Kressel. I'm the director of UT Learning Development, and we started this series because there was a lot going on around UT and Austin and really the nation in terms of people finding resources for growing their career. And I wanted to, find some opportunity to share the kind of resources that we have at UT. And people like Melissa and Leslie and Binta, people were just already reaching out to see how they could help. And so we put this little series together, and it's been some really interesting discussion. I'll just say Melissa is a nationally certified counselor and a licensed professional counselor. She got her master's at Texas State in professional counseling. And I think you joined UT Austin in 2017, and she's been a career coach with Liberal Arts Services. And you're really well known and respected in the UT community. So we're honored to have you here, and we're looking forward to this presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I will go ahead and share my screen. I hope everyone can see. And I'll just get my Zoom up, my PowerPoint. And all right, well, howdy y'all. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I'm Melissa Totah, and I'm excited to be presenting to you all on Playing to Your Strengths, Finding the Right Career Path for You. As Emil mentioned, you may have received some pre-work with assessments prior to this session. If you had a chance to complete some or all of them beforehand, great. If not, no worries. You can still follow along with the content today and complete the assessments at a later time. If you have completed the assessments, it may help to have the worksheet in front of you for quick reference. Part 1 contains information that you may or may not have filled out previously, and Part 2 is something that you can optionally fill in as we go along today. To get started, please type into the chat where you are, what drew you to this workshop, and what type of coffee you prefer. And I'm going to see if I can look at the chat while we're going. It might be a little bit of yep, you can see it. Okay, great. Coffee, illy decaf, cold brew coffee, yum, no coffee. Sometimes coffee is not great. San Diego tea. Okay, these are coming in more quickly for me to actually read them off, but thank you for sharing. And you might be wondering, why coffee? Well, careers are like coffee. Not everyone likes the same blend. As you can see, it can be a challenge to get the flavor right, and sometimes preferences change over time. So today's presentation is going to be a taste of how to explore your strengths, interests, and personality characteristics to maximize your chances of career fulfillment. Since we only have an hour, this is going to be a very high-level overview of areas to assess regarding yourself and what makes you tick. Feel free to enter any questions into the Q&A, but we may not get to everything right away in the interest of time. After the presentation, we will also share some resources to allow you to get a fuller flavor of the career options available, enabling you to make an informed choice despite the seemingly endless menu items. So, much like entering a new restaurant or coffee shop, it can feel overwhelming to be faced with so many possible new experiences. And do you really need to pick just one? The answer is no. You can do a portfolio career and have as many different combinations as you want. But regardless of what you decide, I hope you get a latte out of today's presentation. So let's start with strengths. What are they? Are strengths the same as skills, or is there more to it? And most importantly, what does this all mean for your career? If you've taken the High 5 Strengths Assessment and/or the VIA Character Strengths Assessment beforehand, you may have noticed some common themes. If so, what themes did you notice? Did the strengths that you received resonate, and did you experience any aha moments? If you want to type into the chat any key themes or insights that may have arisen from your strengths assessments, then go for it. And thank you for sharing the assessment links. This is great. So if anyone wants to go ahead and take them while we're presenting, whatever works for you. did the high five and ask my husband to do it on me. Creativity, artistic. Okay, great. The artistic, that's going to be relevant when we get to the interest section, and then only one resulting overlap. Strategist. Yeah, this is great. So strengths can be defined in many ways, one of which may be things that make you feel strong. Strengths aren't limited to just skills, things that you're good at, although still skills and strengths can often correlate. When brainstorming potential strengths, the key here is to think about the times you felt strong when using your skills. What are you good at that also makes you feel strong? Another key to your strengths could be areas that other folks bring to your attention. What compliments do you remember receiving by others? In many cases, you could be praised for qualities or capabilities that feel like no big deal. If that's the case, it's a huge clue that it's a strength that comes so naturally, you don't even notice it. Another question to ask yourself is, what have you accomplished that made you feel proud? Is there a time when you faced difficult odds, but managed to discover previously untapped strengths? Think about what you've done well, the obstacles you've faced, how you've overcome those limitations to achieve your goals, and why it feels like an achievement. After brainstorming in these areas, do you notice alignment with your strengths assessment results? If so, what are they? Take some time to note any themes or commonalities that come to mind, then return to this exercise to continue brainstorming. Another way to think about strengths is by incorporating the concept of flow. When it comes to strengths, there will naturally be an element of talent or ability combined with the challenge or engagement of maximizing your efforts. I will see if I can pronounce this name without butchering it. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi described a flow state as being completely involved in an activity for its own sake. Time flies, and you're using your skills to the utmost. As you can see here, in the model of flow, there are two axes involved, level of ability and level of challenge. Thanks, Emil. Glad I didn't butcher it too badly. If you're engaged in a task which requires you to do work where you don't feel adequately prepared to perform up to expectations, that would fall on the left side of this chart, low ability. The upper left corner shows what can happen if you're tasked with something highly challenging, but have not been equipped with the tools to succeed, anxiety. You may feel alert, but stressed, so it's not a healthy state to maintain for an extended period. While occasional anxiety can temporarily motivate people to improve and quickly hone their abilities, prolonged anxiety and stress can lead to burnout, and we all know burnout bad. If you're working on a task that isn't particularly difficult or challenging, but that doesn't make use of your abilities, you're likely to develop a sense of apathy. You could feel sad and depressed, knowing that you're able to do more, but not sure exactly what that is. The state is represented in the lower left corner. With prolonged apathy, people are likely to feel underutilized and may end up leaving their roles altogether. The right side of the model shows what happens when a work role taps into someone's abilities. When a person with high capabilities isn't fully challenged, there may still be some enjoyment involved initially. The lower right corner indicates a state of relaxation, which involves more pleasant emotions like confidence and contentment. In the short term, relaxation can be a good springboard to build confidence, but the contentment involved with a relaxed state can sometimes turn into boredom if the challenge remains low. As you can probably guess, the flow state is where the magic happens. Flow states typically involve both high challenge and high ability. People tend to feel focused and happy when experiencing flow. Have you ever experienced a flow state? If so, what was happening? How did you feel? What skills did you use? And what was the outcome? If you received a worksheet in advance, you can write your answers down as they come to you. Gordon says, I got stuck in relaxation/boredom in my last job. Been there. I totally understand that. Take a minute to think of instances when you were so focused and so engaged in something, you didn't notice the time passing. You could think of this as being in the zone. Typically, people who are happiest at work have the opportunity to experience a flow state from time to time. Due to the extreme level of engagement, flow states may not be sustainable for the majority of the day, but the most fulfilling roles will fully use your abilities, even though the level of engagement will vary. You could spend most of your time feeling relaxed and maintaining a sense of controlled confidence with moments of high focus and peak happiness sprinkled in. Dawn says, flow state has been in my HR role here at the university. I'm so happy to hear that. I love when people are in the right roles. If you could design a work situation that allowed you to experience a flow state from time to time, what would that look like? What strengths would you use and how would you feel? Write down whatever insights come to you, and then we'll shift gears to talk about interests. Remember, you can always return to these exercises later.
Did you want people to share some of their flow states in the chat as well? I see people
Sure,
doing that already.
Absolutely. And I see that there are a couple questions and comments. Just one more thing. And then 4 hours later, just one more thing. Yeah, if you want to just keep at it, that's a great example of a flow state. Mina has the question, can you be in a flow state and then feel tired when you are done? Absolutely. The level of engagement is so high that it's not going to be sustainable 100% of the time. I think of a flow state as being so much using your key capabilities and being so engaged in something that in many cases you will be exhausted when it's done.
I also can't help myself but to comment on the flow state, because this is kind of an interesting subject for me too.
Please do.
In terms of like the sustainability side of it, of course, you're still going to get fatigued. I mean, it doesn't give you superhuman strength. So you have to be aware of it, so when you're doing those things where time starts slipping by, you sort of lose time, you have to still have to be self-aware and be cognizant of things like, your neck is hurting, you have to use a restroom, or you're hungry, like listen to your body, because you still are going to get fatigued. It's not, although time is slipping by, you still have to be aware of yourself.
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, I think being in a flow state, you can forget to eat, you can forget to pee, and then all of a sudden, a few hours later, you're like, oh, wait, I'm noticing my bodily urges or functions need to be taken care of. So
Right.
not to be gross, but yeah, I mean, you need to make sure that you're checking in with yourself so that the flow state doesn't completely deplete you. That's a really great point. If you could design your own ideal work environment, think about what that would look like. Flow states that you've experienced and strengths that you've utilized may align with your natural interest areas. So we will start this section on interests by examining themes around what you enjoy and using those themes to determine the code or ideal combination of your interest areas that you can seek when generating potential opportunities. So you can start by asking yourself a few classic career counselor type questions. First off, what do you do for fun? Secondly, what did you do for fun as a child that you no longer do as an adult? As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? If you could do anything based on sheer enjoyment and regardless of pay or existing education, what would it be? If you could take a free class on any topic of your choice, regardless of how rational it was, what would it be? You may already notice some similarities with the descriptions on the hexagon, which will be coming up next, but we'll dig in deeper on the next couple slides. The basic 6 areas of interest are as follows: realistic or doers, investigative or thinkers, artistic or creators, social or helpers, enterprising or persuaders, and then conventional or organizers. You might even ask yourself which ones sound the most like you to start.
So there's a sort of a comment in the question
yeah.
that I'd like to read too, and maybe you can comment on it too.
Absolutely.
This model of flow seems to imply that one can only be productive if they have some positive internal sense from the activity. This seems to not match experience. It is quite possible to be very accomplished at a thing you don't like doing and be terrible at things you do like.
That is so true. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. It is true that flow is typically an enjoyable state. It doesn't mean that you aren't going to be good at certain things, but I think everyone has had that experience of really being good at something because you've honed that skill over time, and yet thinking, I would rather have my teeth pulled with no Novocaine than have to do this for 8 hours a day. So sometimes you might develop skills that are really great over time, but if it's not what you ultimately enjoy doing, then I would hesitate to consider that one of your core strengths. And this is definitely something that could be a conversation for later. But yes, you're correct. It's quite possible to be very accomplished at a thing you don't like doing and terrible at things you do like. So I would think about, what do you like, or what interests you that you may not yet be skilled in? And how can you work on developing some of those skills so that you can become competent and then ultimately work towards a flow state in the long run? And I know Emil and several other people who have been on these different workshops have shared resources for growing in certain areas. So as we move through the interest areas, you might even think about which of these are naturally interesting to you. And if you don't yet have skills within those areas of interests, then how can you develop those skills? So LinkedIn Learning, MOOCs, massive online open courseware. There are so many free resources that are available right now where you can start to develop skills in these areas. And that's what happens a lot of the time. People are kind of taught to focus on what's practical versus what really makes them tick. Whereas in life, there are normally a lot of areas that overlap. And so if you can figure out something that does make you tick that is also practical, then typically that's where you'll find the most fulfillment.
There's some good comments in the chat too. Kathy sort of points out the flow is not the same thing as productivity. It can be,
yes,
just not necessarily the same thing. And Csikszentmihalyi will talk about how it's this cross section of things that are very challenging and things that you're good at. So that doesn't mean, so if you think about being interested in the piano, a piano, the amount of complexity and challenge to it is infinite, right, or indefinite. So what might not be a very quality player, that still is challenging to that person, and they're enjoy it and they're good at it, and they can find that sense of flow. So it's not really necessarily about productivity. Of course, in this context, when we're talking about career development, it's natural to gravitate to that. But I do think it's important to sort of point out that there are levels of how good somebody is at something and how challenging it is to that person as well.
Thanks, Emil. That's good stuff. Absolutely. And a lot of this, will align as we continue to move forward, but feel free to jump in if you do have any questions. We'll try to get to them in the allotted time. But basically, when it comes to interests, then you might think in terms of what your themes are. Sometimes the acronym RIASEC is used when describing the different areas. So that stands for realistic, investigative, social, enterprising, conventional, and artistic. I skipped over. So let's work our way around the hexagon to discuss each area a bit further and to confirm which of these most strongly resonate with you. So first off, realistic or doers. Things are central in this interest area. What comes to mind when you hear the word realistic? You can type into the chat if you want, and you can think in terms of examples of realistic careers. So realistic typically has to do with hands-on, possibly working outside, practical, absolutely, mechanical work. Some examples of realistic careers could be technician, farmer, mechanic, yes, construction, landscaping, tangible deliverables. Engineering, yes, I would say especially the engineering technician, the really hands-on side, because actually with engineering, it could be a combination of realistic and investigative, especially for more of the strategic kinds of thinking. So conservation, yeah, that could be. If it involves hands-on, working outside, something practical, then it could fall into the category of realistic. And as we'll find when we move through these different areas, it's not just about picking that one and sticking to that, but most people typically have anywhere from 1 to 3 that really stand out as things that they enjoy doing, whether that's in a work context, whether that's in a personal context. So starting with realistic, I think you guys had some really good examples in there. So builders, math, IT, yes. And actually with math and IT, that's a good segue into investigative, because sometimes that would involve the higher level thinking skills. So investigative or thinkers, central to this would be ideas. So what comes to mind when you hear the word investigative? Librarians, yeah, that Dewey Decimal System advocate, research. With librarians, there could even be a conventional element, journalist, potentially, yes, an investigative journalist, vaccine developer, mathematician, reporter, yes, private detective, something like that. Historian or art historian, that would be really interesting. I would say with art historian, yes, there's going to be a lot of research, detective, my ideal retirement career. So there's that interlap sometimes between investigative and artistic. So police sketch artist might be an example of investigative and artistic. So if you think of examples of investigative careers, some examples would be scientist, researcher, and mathematician. If you start moving it into the artistic area, then absolutely journalists could fall into that category. You've got the investigative piece, and then you've got the writing piece. So segueing, yes, forensic scientists, absolutely. So then there's artistic or creators. So creativity is central with the artistic interest area. What comes to mind when you hear the word artistic? Sculptor, painter, actress, artist, writer, painter, writer. Yes, yes. Architect, painters, painting pictures of my cats. That's my sister. Yeah, she's a whiz at that. Performer. Yes, absolutely. The 3 that I came up with are designer, journalist, and performer. And sadly, when it comes to the artistic area, a lot of people are told to move away from this in the name of practicality, because they think, oh, there's that whole starving artist stereotype, which doesn't have to be true, first off. But then secondly, there are a lot of design type careers that might draw on artistic skills. This assessment has supported my current exploration of woodworking, furniture, building. Top 3 were artistic, realistic, and investigative. That is really great insight. So yes, documentarian, sculptor. In many cases, if you have the artistic and the realistic, you might enjoy doing things that are more hands-on. If you prefer artistic and enterprising, for instance, then you might be more of a performing artist. So yeah, and then some people decide, well, I want to go into graphic design or something that's maybe structured and yet allows for some level of creativity. One big thing with artistic types, and this is a huge overgeneralization, but in most cases, they tend to prefer things that are free-flowing and not necessarily as structured. So that can be kind of, as you see on the hexagon, it's opposite from conventional. Doesn't mean that artistic and conventional can't exist within the same person. In fact, librarian might be one of those examples where you have the structure of Dewey Decimal System and information systems, but there's also that piece of artistic books and literature and things along those lines. So moving into social, the next one that we can discuss is social or helpers. What's central in this one is People. So what comes to mind? Oh, actually, before we jump into there, if you're creative and analytical work, would that be considered artistic? Possibly, possibly. So a lot of fields could draw on creativity. There are a lot of nuances here. Absolutely. And so we'll be thinking in terms of what are the intersections between these areas, which 1 to 3 are most prevalent for you, but sometimes it's not going to fit neatly within a structure. So you might need to get creative when you think about some of these things. Yes, strong artistic and social. Might be investigative if you are creative and analytical. Yes, that's the thing. Investigative people can definitely show creativity. So thank you all for your sharing. When you hear the word social, what comes to mind? What do you think some careers might be that would be considered social? And what are some descriptive words that might come to mind? Project manager, politician, event planner, social worker. Wow, the chat is blowing up. So counselors, social workers, club promoter, communications, teacher. Yes, communications, I think, is a great example of something that might actually cross the line between artistic, social, and even enterprising, depending on whether that's a performance type of communications or whether it's more written word. But sales and marketing, you guys are providing the best segues from one section into the next one, because enterprising would come next. But yes, the 3 kind of quintessential social careers that came to my mind when putting this together were teacher, nurse, and therapist. And that could be physical therapist, emotional therapist, counseling, definitely. Receptionist, yes, if it's someone who really enjoys interacting with the public. Front desk worker, absolutely, that could be considered social. And usually the best receptionists are also going to have some high conventional skills, which we'll see soon because they're very organized. But before we jump into doorman, bouncer, yeah. So executive assistants, for sure. So we can go ahead and move into enterprising. Enterprising or persuaders are next. So tasks are critical within this interest area. Excuse me. What comes to mind when you hear the word enterprising? So that might be director, manager, absolutely. Some examples of enterprising careers: sales, yes. Highly persuasive car salesperson, business person. Yes, project managers, for sure. Anyone who can carry things out in an organized way by working through others. So they may or may not be on the front lines, but typically strategic planners can be very enterprising. Coordinators, yes. General, admiral, small business owner, yes. The 3 that came to my mind when putting this together would be entrepreneur, business manager, and salesperson. And so most UT admin support positions really fall in all of these categories. Absolutely. So that's the thing. Things don't always fall neatly into 1 or 2 or even 3. You'll most likely, if you're interested in all of these different areas, find a role where you can draw on these interest areas. Those will be the most satisfying for you. And one other thing to consider, which we'll talk about in just a moment, is the work environment. So if you look at the tasks and what's required on paper, that's one piece of the puzzle. But then there's also this whole question of work environment, and an administrative support position in one department may be drastically different from what it is in another department, depending on who your coworkers are and what the general culture or vibe is from the office. So yeah, that's a really great point. And manage to avoid conventional by taking a job that never existed before. That's so cool, Gordon. Wow, I would like to hear more about that. I think you've talked about it, but sometime. So we've gone through enterprising, and then finally conventional or organizers. Those tend to be things where order is central. So what comes to mind when you hear conventional? In most cases, this would involve office manager, executive assistant, administrative assistant, accountant, absolutely. So anything where attention to detail, military, right? So keeping people in line, safety, emergency manager, statistics, nuclear plant operator, right? So anything where a lot of structure and order, data entry, bank teller, government in general, that tends to be kind of so yeah, you might think of more of a bureaucratic type environment. So if you think in terms of departments or institutions and the cultures, anything to do with bookkeeping, yeah, I mean, these are all great examples of conventional. So when you've thoroughly thought about that, if you've taken the ONET interest profiler before today, you can always consult whatever the scores were in each of these areas. Think about the scores that were highest for you. And then as we worked our way around the hexagon, did your highest ONET interest profiler scores align with your actual interest areas? So do the descriptions of each one sound similar to the answers that you gave to the initial questions? My ADHD will fight conventional to the death. Keep on that, Gordon. Yes, mine doesn't really make sense though, as identical high scores in artistic and conventional. Ooh, I'd like to dig into that further. That would be very interesting. And sometimes you will have multiple high scores that on paper don't even appear that they should be together, but yet they are. I mean, we're all complex humans. I own it contrasts with the other results. Okay, so fair. And that's why I always say assessments are good. They are one area of self-exploration that could be useful, but ultimately it's up to you to decide what resonates the most with you. So it's all just information. And if you think back again at the questions that were mentioned previously, now that you know a little bit more about these areas, think in terms of what do you do for fun? What did you do for fun as a child that you no longer do as an adult? As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? If you could do anything based on sheer enjoyment and regardless of pay or existing education, what would that be? If you could take a free class on any topic of your choice, regardless of how rational it was or how much it applied to your current role, what would that be? And then finally, what do you do in your spare time as far as websites, podcasts? What's on your list of favorites? What do you consistently come back to just because you're interested in them? Culinary school, glass blowing. Oh, I love these. So it sounds like some artistic folks in the group here. Problem with questions which use words like always. It's never that simple. Absolutely. It is never an always and never kind of thing. Yeah, great. So continue to let this marinate. And now that we've learned about the 6 primary career interest areas, think about which ones resonate with you the most. I think you've all been thinking in terms of 1 to 3 that seem to reflect your most prominent areas of interest, and then try to arrange them in order of preference from most to least. So, wow, Gordon, all but conventional, we're around 35. So my sense is you probably like a role that has a lot of variety and doesn't require a lot of detail work. So there are roles out there that are like that. And again, you don't have to just pick one, a little of anything. Yes. So again, if you haven't yet typed your 3-letter code into the chat to share with the group, you could do that. You could think of careers that satisfy as many different interest areas as possible. IAS, so investigative, artistic, social, CSE, AER. In the follow-up handout, there's going to be a link where you can explore careers based on combining up to 3 different areas of interest. So keep an eye out for that. And now that we've discussed strengths and interests, it's time to move on to the next ingredient, personality. And I will have this caveat, if you are familiar with Myers-Briggs, I know it's come under quite a bit of scrutiny lately. And I always think this isn't something that you should use to prescribe exactly what you should be doing. Any personality type can be successful in any career. It's just a question of what will you enjoy and what will be the most appropriate fit for you, what kind of work environment will feel most like home. This shouldn't be used to screen people out for certain roles. It should never be used in recruitment. That's considered unethical. But INFJ, okay, great. There's one person, two INFJs. INFP, ENFP are.
We have a question about why Myers-Briggs is coming under scrutiny. Do you mind if I handle that one?
Yeah. Basically, there's a series that I have not yet watched, but I think it's on maybe HBO.
I think so, yeah.
Talking about how people can misuse these results. And so big data sometimes will gather this information and store it. And it's very important to be ethical with the use of these. Like, there are certain pre-employment assessments that are specifically used for that purpose and designed for that purpose. But when it comes to the Myers-Briggs, this is not an appropriate use of it. So it's
not a science,
right?
And even Myers-Briggs says that it's not ethical to use Myers-Briggs for recruitment and performance evaluation. You hear this phrase a lot. Fortunately, people are starting to realize how bad it is. But when somebody doesn't get a job and they say she's not the right fit, like, that's a red flag. That just and often that's kind of the way that Myers-Briggs can be misused, is saying, well, we're really looking for an introvert, we're really looking for an extrovert, and you should not be using really any kind of assessment for those reasons, because we want diversity, right? We want diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and so you have to be careful about how you use these sorts of assessments.
Wow. And yeah, and like Tina mentioned, ISTP for the Jung assessment and ENFJ for the 16 personalities. So on the surface, that's about as opposite as you can get. And yet both of those dichotomies will often exist within the same person. So what you could think in terms of defining where you fall with a lot of this, first off, think about, how do other people describe you and how do you think of yourself? So are you sweet, bold, mellow? Do you like to go for the gusto, like a quick espresso shot? Or do your depth and complexity sometimes come as a pleasant surprise to others? Your personality type can be a factor in determining the right work environment and cultural fit, but personality alone will rarely determine whether you can be successful. Persona, thank you. Yes, I couldn't remember. It can help you nail down the factors that will feel the most natural to you in a work environment. So anyone of any personality type can work in any field. But how important is it for your workplace to feel like home? Typically, the closer the alignment of personality type and work environment, the more natural you'll feel at work. So I know several of you have taken the Jungian personality assessments. You're already typing information into the chat. Best known one is the MBTI. Didn't mention that one, or didn't link to that one because there is a fee to it. But the 16 personalities and the Jung typology test are both free assessments that are approximations of what your Myers-Briggs type might be. But again, take all of this with a grain of salt. And yeah, I mean, some of them, DISC, True Colors, there are so many different other ways to assess personality. So this is just one. But if you want to share, if you want to follow up on any of this, I'm always happy to continue the discussion. Just in the interest of time, this is kind of a very brief overview. So what does this all mean? First of all, worth reiterating, personality type may be used as a factor when considering your career choice, but don't let that prescribe what is right for you. So any personality type can be successful in any career, but certain work environments may be a better fit based on your natural style. So overall, these qualities can be thought of as preferences rather than hard and fast ways of boxing people in. Each of the letters within a Jungian personality type may be located along a continuum. So again, this isn't an either or dichotomy where either you're an extrovert or you're an introvert. It's more nuanced than that. On the handout, you may have noticed there's a continuum where you can mark how far over to one side or the other you consider yourself. So regardless of what the assessment told you, be thinking in terms of the descriptions here, how well they resonate, and then where you would place yourself in each of these categories. So where do you fall along the spectrum of possibilities? You can compare this to any prior assessments that you've taken, ask yourself what resonates, what sounds inaccurate. It can be fun, it can be interesting, but you are the best judge of who you are. So the 4 letters for the combination of 16 different overall types are E or I, S or N, T or F, and J or P. Brief descriptions are on this slide and we'll go over each one individually. First off, the first letter, E or I, stands for extroverted or introverted. There is a misconception that extroverts are always outgoing and introverts are always shy. Extroverts can be shy at times, introverts can be outgoing, and really it has more to do with where you get your energy. So are you energized by being around people? Are you energized by being alone? Extroverts are typically energized by being around people, and introverts are typically recharging their batteries by themselves, but very few of us are purely one way or the other. Depends on the people. Yes, so true. If you're around your people, you might find that extroverted side coming out. Whereas if you're in an environment where you don't have as much in common with your coworkers or wherever you are at a party, you might find that tendency towards introversion creeping in. So a lot of this is situational, but knowing that it can fluctuate from mood to mood, situation to situation, where do you think you would typically fall on the IE continuum? So you can mark it on your worksheet if you have that handy. Hardcore introvert, except when I'm with my partner. He's the only person who I get energy from. Okay, yeah. An extrovert in an introverted workplace. Yeah, and sometimes you might find yourself an introvert in an extroverted workplace. And it's all, how well can you function? How much do you want to act outside of your preference, your natural preference, in order to be successful? How draining do you find it? So the second letter, N or S, stands for intuition or sensing. N is used for intuition because I was already used for introvert. So whether a person naturally notices the big picture or focuses more on the details is the key differentiator here. And I see there is something in the Q&A. Can someone share the worksheet? Yes, I think the worksheets will be provided beforehand, and there is also going to be a worksheet for afterwards.
You can check your email. That we sent emails to all registrants, so you might want to check your spam folder. But we will share them after the last session. We'll be sending an email to everybody to share the links to the YouTube channel as well.
Okay, and someone raised a hand. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, 3 raised hands.
There are a couple. Oh, they took them down.
Okay, great. Yeah, and really, I mean, we probably have 5 more minutes left of content, and then if you want to do some Q&A at the end, I feel like I'm breezing through this, but knowing that there's just an hour, there's so much to cover. Pattern recognition for me is the key characteristic of N versus S. That's a very, very good insight. I think of it as, does a person naturally notice the big picture, think about future possibilities, maybe sense the vibe in a room when they walk in? It's more of this sixth sense kind of orientation. Or do you tend to focus more on the trees, if you're thinking of the forest and the trees. N's would be forest people, S's would be tree people. And so again, it might depend on situation, but I think of it as big picture for intuitive folks and the details for more sensory folks. So whatever you can see, hear, taste, smell, touch, if that's how you primarily gather information, that tends to be more sensory. So Jennifer says you're an S, yeah. And if you tend to take things in through more of a sixth sense or through intuition, then you might be more of an N. But again, situational, it can depend on what's happening. Childhood imagination can be an N indicator. That's true. If you had an imaginary friend, I think of N as being creative, but S can also be creative. So I don't want to overgeneralize in those ways. But basically the third letter, T or F, refers to thinking or feeling. This isn't an either or dichotomy. Everyone thinks and everyone feels. And the key question here is, how do you make your decisions? So thinkers typically make decisions based on logical analysis. They might make pro-con lists and just think about things in a very, very logical manner, very rationally, whereas feelers would often take the human piece into account. So thinking in terms of feelers, what are your personal values? How could your decision affect others? Where would you fall on the TF continuum? And I see a lot of chat is coming in, and unfortunately, I probably can't keep up with all of it, but questions about if you want to talk to someone to follow up on any of this, I would love to have something like that moving forward. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but Emil, I am happy to chat with you. And then if there's a way that I can be of service in some way, then that would be fantastic. But yeah, I love, the one-on-one interaction and digging deeper into this stuff as well. So think about the TF continuum. Where would you fall when you make decisions, important decisions? Do you normally focus primarily on being rational? Do you primarily focus on your values and how other people would be affected, or somewhere in the middle? And then finally, J stands for judging and P stands for perceiving. One of the misconceptions here is that people see the letter J and they might think judgmental. And even the word judgmental sounds judgmental. Judging, I'm not sure why this was selected as the word that they used, but basically judging means structured and organized. So people who prefer judging tend to be great planners. They typically feel more comfortable knowing what to expect from day to day than having things up in the air. And Kathy said, I like judicious for J. That's a great reframe. I like that too. Perceivers, on the other hand, feel most comfortable when they can keep their options open. They like to go with the flow, and they tend to value flexibility in their work environments. Sometimes they might struggle with being organized, but they can pivot at the last minute and be very flexible. So as you can see, there are strengths and potential shortcomings with both types. But again, very few people are 100% in one direction or the other. The person who will never confirm for dinner. Yeah, that's a good example of a P. Yeah, and then J when it comes to vacations, so liking to plan things in advance. And then P, so depends on the situations, very flexible. So yes, I will move forward just in the interest of time, but overall, whatever combination of letters you come up with will yield a 4-letter code, each of which has different descriptors depending on which website you consult. So on the worksheet, you might see that INFJ is called advocate. That was taken from one website. On this visual right here, INFJ could be considered insightful motivator. So you might read some of these descriptions and say, yes, that sounds like me. No, that doesn't sound like me. Like Jamie, you might say, I'm literally all of these, which I think anyone can wear the hat of any of these types depending on what the situation requires. And some people are very close to the middle in all of these aspects. And so just be thinking in terms of, since we're talking about finding the right career path, then workplace setting wise, where have you found that you are most able to be your most authentic self? So if you find that one of these types resonates the most, then what workplaces have you found where you can combine those the most easily? If anyone attending in this class, I think go ahead. Yes, ask away. That would be really, I would love to see where all of this can go.
So that comment was just a panelist. Somebody asked about
okay.
If it's appropriate to ask if anyone attending the class would be interested in meeting others in this class to talk about their career paths. I want to make sure that you finish, Melissa, but at the end, I'd like to sort of address this topic too, but go ahead, sorry.
For sure, thank you, yes. So one final kind of activity before we wrap up. When it comes to work environment, there's a fun exercise that Barbara Scher, who wrote a book, I Could Do Anything If I Only Knew What It Was. She had introduced this two possible scenarios. If you can think in terms of your job from heaven and your job from hell, think of a job that you've absolutely loved and one that you've absolutely hated, if you have had one of each. How were the two work environments different? If you've never experienced a job that you loved, try to imagine what might make you happy. If you haven't experienced a job that makes you miserable, lucky you. That's great. That's really wonderful. And I hope that that continues. Sometimes if you haven't experienced either one, it can be easiest to imagine what the most terrible situation would be like and then flip it around so that it looks like it's exact opposite. So think in terms of what would your job from hell look like compared to the job from heaven in terms of human interaction or lack thereof. So how much people time would you want? What would that percentage look like? What would you want your day-to-day work to consist of? Would you prefer focusing on creating a vision of the future and possibilities, or would you prefer work that's practical, down to earth, straightforward, and focused on the here and now? Loved working in construction and hated hospital IT. Okay, great. Yeah, micromanaging boss who knows less than me about every single thing being criticized equals job from hell. I think probably a lot of people can relate to that. In your ideal environment, would the relationships between coworkers be friendly and personal, or would you stick to all business and say, we work together, we can be, my friends are outside of the workplace? And these are huge generalizations, but just questions to ask yourself about the ideal work environment. Structure versus flexibility. Would you prefer to know what's expected, or would you rather have some wiggle room for spontaneity? A salesperson at a cosmetics counter would be pretty rough. And for some people, they might think, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. Not good at lying, small talk. With the IE scale, you may think in terms of people interaction versus alone time. Your answer there could align with your introvert extrovert preference. I'm just going to breeze through the rest of this. When it comes to NS, think about what was prioritized in each of the work environments that you've enjoyed versus hated. So is it more important to think in terms of vision and the big picture, possibilities, or is more of the preference on detailed present moment tasks? And does that align with your NS preference? With the TF scale, do you prefer to stick to business in the workplace, or do you prefer getting to know your coworkers on a personal level? When you make decisions, do you tend to take that logical information into account? And is that what's prioritized in your work environment? Or is it more flexible where you want to hear input from different sides and do what makes people happiest? And then finally, T and F, are you happy working from home or not? That could also be an introvert extrovert thing. But But yeah, with the PJ scale, finally, perceiving and judging, people who prefer judging probably want a more structured work environment. People in a P preference would normally like something that allows for more flexibility. And then, so think in terms of how your personality type aligns with the different work environments you've experienced or imagined. What fits your job from heaven, your job from hell. INFP, Jamie, same here. INFP, love working from home, but still love the human side of working from home. So interacting with people, even if it is through technical means. Yeah, introverts in general will probably be more comfortable working from home and less likely to go as stir crazy. INTJ, same. MS Teams works well for me. Okay, so take a moment to locate your 4-letter personality code and description. If it resonates, take a moment to think about the work environment that would be most encouraging to someone with your personality type. Write down any key themes and insights at the bottom of your worksheet to wrap things up. And then just to recap, today we took the first step towards finding your unique blend, taking a sip. We discussed how to assess your strengths, interests, and personality and discern what job functions and work environments may be most enjoyable. I hope today's sip will help you gather energy for the journey ahead, as well as considering how well your current role aligns with your ideal one. The next step in the journey will involve creating a menu of options customized to you. So what possible careers align with your strengths, interests, and personality? Keep an eye out for the worksheet with more resources that you can consult moving forward. Once you're more aware of the options, you can do a taste test with each one. Begin by researching your options by viewing websites such as Career One Stop, ONET Online, and the Occupational Outlook Handbook. These are great jumping off points as far as going down the rabbit hole of discovering information about different careers, but those are kind of the big 3 general ones. The handout will contain links to those. And then the other thing, talk to people in fields or departments of interest to learn the inside scoop. So next week's Career Development Lunch and Learn session with Leslie Robinson will provide more information on networking and being strategic. So if you've heard of informational interviews, talking to people about their roles, what they like, what they don't like, what advice they might have, getting the inside scoop about what's involved is a great way to explore possible career paths. And then adjust the flavor, incorporate the information about paths you're considering, eliminate anything that does not enhance your path, and then make tiny tweaks and adjustments to find your perfect blend. Finally, repeat as needed. Expect to try many different options and to change your preferences over time. If you can embrace the process and have realistic expectations regarding the time frame, then hopefully you can actually savor this journey and have it be something that's fun. So thank you all for your time and your comments. This has been really fun. I have really loved this. If you have any questions, I think we're technically out of time. I really am passionate about career development, would love to see all UT students, faculty, and staff happily engage in career roles that make full use of your talents. And this is what I want for everyone on the 40 acres and beyond. So if everyone can use their strengths within an environment that fits their interests and their personality, career development that starts here can truly change the world. Thank you for attending, and I hope you can join next week for more information on strategic networking. Happy exploring.
Thank you, Melissa. This was great. This was a flurry of activity and engagement. Clearly, people were really excited about it, as I knew they would be. We always are open to hearing your thoughts and suggestions. You're free to email us at UT Learning and Development at utld@austin.utexas.edu. Again, thank you for all the participants, and special thanks to Melissa. You're amazing. It was great. Thank you so much. I hope we can do something again like this very soon.
I hope so too. And you are amazing as well. And thank you for this opportunity. This has been really, really fun.
Good. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.